let me begin from where we left off last class. So in the previous class, we learned about the 5 postulates. Okay, the postulates talked about what the state of the system is, what happens if you carry out a measurement, and how the state evolves in time. Right. So these were the major crux of the 5 postulates. Okay. So here we are going to go into some more detail about the postulates and then also do some problems. Okay. So, all right. Okay, so first let's start about the superposition principle. We already know what a superposition principle is, right? But basically, what superposition principle states is that a state function or a state vector can be written in terms of a linear combination of other state vectors, right? So that is what we mean by superposition principle. So let's read the statement. The state of a so right. So superposition is obviously linear combination of wave functions, and it also says that the state of a system does not have to be represented by a single wave function. You can also represent it by a superposition of 2 or more wave functions. So that is what we mean by superposition, meaning linear combination of wave functions that can also represent the state of the system. Okay, so just to give you an example, if psi1 and psi2 are independently satisfy the Schrodinger's equation, then the linear combination, that is the superposition of psi1 and psi2, which let's call it psi. So the superposed wave function, let's call it psi. So that wave function psi of r comma t will also satisfy the Schrodinger's equation. Okay. So obviously, if the individual components satisfy Schrodinger's equation, then the wave function which is made up of those individual components will also satisfy the Schrodinger's equation. So here is an example. So if H, so the Hamiltonian, right, operator acting on psi1 will give you E1 psi1. So this is a Schrodinger's equation. And then H psi2 will give you E2 psi2. Then, so actually this should not be time dependent because the Hamiltonian, well, we'll come to that. But let's say the Hamiltonian operator acts on psi1 and you get E1 psi1, and Hamiltonian operator acts on psi2, you get E2 psi2. Then this psi, which is made up of alpha 1 psi1 plus alpha 2 psi2, the linear combination of psi1 and psi2 with alpha 1 and alpha 2 both are complex. Okay. Then again you will see that H operator, Hamiltonian operator acting on psi will give you some E psi. Okay. So this is true in general. All right. So the new wave function psi of r comma t represents a possible physical state of the system. Okay. So what is the probability for this superposition, right? So what is the probability that you will get one of these states, that the system is in one of these states? That probability we need to find out. So the total probability is obviously given by, if you just take the scalar product of this psi, of this ket psi, right, which is this function. So the total probability is given by this function. So instead of psi writing it this way, you can write it in terms of the superposition of the wave function, right, which is sigma I alpha I psi I whole square. So this is the norm of the wave function, right? So if you do this norm, now you have to assume that, of course, each of the individual components, right, each of these psi i's are orthonormal, okay, which means psi I will give you 1 and psi j when I is not equal to j will give you 0, right, which is what I mean by orthonormal. So this is when j is not equal to I, it will give you 0, and when j is equal to I, it will give you 1, right? So this is what we mean. So if we use this condition and plug it back into this equation, right, then what we will get? We will get, basically, first of all, what we have to do, we have to take this and then the dagger of this part, right? So if you take dagger of this, then psi j ket psi j becomes bra psi j, and alpha j dagger becomes alpha j star, right? So this is the general thing. And now because psi j psi I is are orthonormal, It means that when j is not equal to I, it will be, this scalar product will be 0, which means that only those terms will survive where j is equal to I. So you can just get rid of one of the index and you will get alpha I whole square. So your probability turns out to be sum of all these alpha I squares. Okay, and each of these alpha 1 square is basically p1, alpha 2 square is equal to p2, alpha 3 square is equal to p3, and so on. Okay, so the total probability is given by this, and each of these alpha I square is basically your pi. Okay, so the pi is nothing but your probability of finding the system in the state psi I. Okay, so that is what pi means. Okay, so pi is the probability of finding the system in the state psi I, because there are the system is made up of the superposition of all of these psi i's. So the probability of finding the system in one of those psi i's is pi. Okay, so now let's do a problem. So yesterday also we learned about probability, and today also. So now I think we can do one problem. So consider a system whose state is given in terms of an orthonormal set of three vectors. Okay, so the three vectors are ket phi 1, ket phi 2, and ket phi 3. Okay, so these are your three vectors, and these three vectors combine together and make up the wave vector psi. Okay, so psi is equal to, in this case, the problem is that psi is given by this linear combination of the three state vectors. Okay, now what is the question? First question is verify that psi is normalized. Then calculate the probability of finding the system in any one of the states phi 1, phi 2, and phi 3. Okay, and then verify that the total probability is equal to 1. Okay, so let's do this. So first of all, we need to verify that psi is normalized. So how will you verify? You just take a scalar product of psi with itself. If it gives you 1 as the answer, then you know that it is normalized. So that's what we will do. Okay, and it is given to us that the vectors, these three vectors, are orthonormal with respect to each other. Okay, so orthonormal means that scalar product of phi I with phi j gives you delta ij. So that is what it means by orthonormal. Okay. So to find if psi is normalized, we need to verify that the scalar product of psi with itself is 1. So first of all, you need this bra psi, right? So you need to write what bra psi is. So bra psi is nothing but root 3 by 3 bra phi 1 plus 2 by 3 bra phi 2 plus root 2 by 3 into bra phi 3. Here, these root 3 by 3, 2 by 3, root 2 by 3, these are coefficients. So these coefficients are real numbers. So because they are real numbers, they are not going to become complex when you change it to bra. If they were complex numbers, then they would have, changed to complex. All right. So now if you take scalar product, all you have to do is you have to multiply this term with this term. Okay. So if you multiply these two terms and take the individual scalar products, only these terms will remain. Okay. So phi 1 term will remain, but all the cross terms will become 0 because all the three states are orthonormal. So the cross terms will become 0 and the similar terms, scalar product of the vector with itself will be 1. So then these terms are 1 essentially, and you are left with 3 by 9 plus 4 by 9 plus 2 by 9. Okay, so you have to carry out this multiplication and do it, only then you will follow it properly. Okay, so if this is it, then if you add up all these three, you get 9 by 9, which is equal to 1. So because you are getting this answer 1, when you compute the scalar product of the vector with itself, it means that that vector is normalized. Okay, so this we know from what we've studied in the previous chapter. Okay, now we need to find the probability of finding the system in state phi 1, phi 2, and phi 3. So we need to compute what is the probability that the system is in state phi 1, phi 2, and phi 3. So let's call P1 the probability that the system is in state phi 1. Okay. So how do we find this P1? We basically do this scalar product. So we compute scalar product of phi 1 with psi and take its norm. Okay. So if we do this, we are going to get P1. All right. This is same as taking just alpha 1 square, right? Which we saw just now. What did we see? We saw P1 is alpha 1 square. So this is this alpha 1. How do you get this alpha 1? You get by taking this type of scalar product. If you take scalar product of phi 1 with psi, you will get alpha 1. And then if you take the norm of that, you will get alpha 1 square. Okay, so this is the same thing written in a different form. All right. You can actually carry out this scalar product and see what you'll get. You know what psi is, you know what ket psi is, so you can just expand the ket psi and then see. So if you expand the ket psi, which I have done here, okay, so I have expanded the ket psi. So ket psi is nothing but root 3 by 3 phi 1 plus 2 by 3 phi 2 plus root 2 by 3 phi 3. And then there is phi 1, so the scalar product becomes here phi 1, here it is phi 1, phi 2, here it is phi 1, phi 3. So these two cross terms become 0 again because the state vectors are orthonormal. Okay. And then only this term remains, and this is obviously equal to 1 because it is orthonormal, right? So you are left with only root 3 by 3 whole square, okay, which is nothing but 1 by 3. And this is same as, like I told you, this is same as A1, norm of A1, right? Square of the norm of A1. So it is root 3 by 3. Square of the norm of A1 is 1 by 3. A1 is root 3 by 3. All right. So this is how you calculate P1. So similarly, you have to calculate P2 as well. What is P2? P2 is probability that the system is in state phi 2. So again, if you do this, you will be left with only this term, and you will get 2 by 3 whole square, which is 4 by 9. So this is your probability for finding the system in state phi 2. Similarly, you can calculate for P3, which is the probability of finding the system in state phi 3. So this you are going to get as 2 by 9. Okay. So the total probability, now they had also asked us to verify the total probability. So we can just add up the total probability, which is P1 plus P2 plus P3, and you will get it as, if you add it up, you're getting it as 1. You get it 1 because we already verified earlier that the wave vector psi, the state vector psi is already normalized, right? We already knew that. So ultimately, it's essentially like verifying the original result, okay? That P1 plus P2 plus P3 should be equal to 1. All right. Is this clear? Any questions up to this point? Okay. Next, the question is, so this is part B of the same question. Now consider now an ensemble of 810 identical systems, okay? Each one of them in the state psi, okay? Now, if the measurements are done on all of them, how many systems will be found in each of the states phi 1, phi 2, and phi 3? Okay. So the question is that all of the systems, there are 810 systems, all of them are in the state psi, which means all of them are unperturbed. You have not performed any measurement on them. So they are all on they are all in the state psi. Now, if you measure, okay, now if you perform a measurement, you have to, so like I've told you, now every time you perform a measurement, it will go to one of the states, one of the phi 1 or phi 2 or phi 3, it will go to one of them. So now they are asking what is, out of these 810 systems, how many of those will go to phi 1, how many of those will go to phi 2, and how many of those will go to phi 3. That is what they want us to find out. Okay. So for this, we need the probability, right? So if we know the probability of the system being in state phi 1, then we can just compute out of 810, this is if out of, right, the probability multiplied by the number of systems, and then we will get the number of systems which are in state phi 1. Okay, so that's how we'll do. So there are total 810 systems. Now, probability that the system is in state phi 1 is P1. So the number of systems that are in state phi 1 is nothing but P1 into 810. So P1 into the total. Okay. So what is P1? P1 is 1 by 3, which we have already found out. So 1 by 3 into 810, it is going to give us 270. So out of 810 systems, 270 systems on average. So this is on an average, okay? When you perform experiment 810 times, sometimes this number might be 271 or sometimes this might be 268. So, but on an average, you will get 270. So 270 systems on an average will be in the state phi1, okay? Similarly, for N2, you need to find N2. So number of systems in state phi2 is what you need to find. So this is nothing but P2 into 810. Okay, so P2 we know it is 4 by 9, and if you multiply this with 810, you will get 360. So if you perform the experiment with all of these systems, then 360 of those measurements will be in the state, will lead to the system being in the state phi2. Okay. Similarly, N3 you can find, which is P3 into 810. So P3 into 810 gives you 180. All right. So is this clear? So this is how the probability works, right? Basically, you should imagine it like rolling a die. So you roll a die, there are 6 possibilities, like 200 times. How many times will you get 1? How many times will you get 2? How many times will you get 3? How many times will you get 4? And so on, right? So if you know the probability of getting 1, if you know the probability of getting 2, etc., then you can find out of those 200 times, how many times on an average you will get 1, how many times on an average you will get 2. So this is the same kind of problem, okay? Next, let's come to observables and operators. Is this clear? Right, the probability concept needs to be clear, otherwise it might become difficult. Anyway, I think today I might not be able to give you any homework problem, but in the next class I'll give you some homework problems. After combining all the concepts that we have studied, there'll be a combined homework problem for it, and then you can solve it and see for yourself how these things work. Okay, now we have observables and operators. So according to the second postulate, a Hermitian operator is associated with every physical observable, right? We learned in the postulate yesterday that for every observable, there corresponds an operator. For example, for energy, which is an observable, there corresponds the operator Hamiltonian. For right, position, which is an observable, there corresponds an operator, the position operator, and so on, right? So for every observable, there is a operator. Now in quantum mechanics, the observable has to be real, like it has to be measurable, which means it has to be real. So if the observable is real, then the operator has to be a Hermitian operator. Okay, this we know from our concepts about matrices, that Hermitian operators always give you real eigenvalues. Okay, so that is why if the observable is a physically measurable observable, then the operator has to be Hermitian. That's why your momentum is minus IH cross dou by dou x. That is also a Hermitian operator. Okay, all right. So the momentum operator in one dimension looks like minus IH cross dou by dou x, and in 3 dimensions it is minus IH cross del. What is del? Del vector we have already seen in the math methods course. So del vector is nothing but dou by dou x plus dou by dou y plus dou by dou z. Okay, so that is your del vector. So now it says that in general, any function f of r comma p that depends on position and momentum variables, right, r and p, can be quantized. Okay, and what is the meaning of quantized? Meaning that it can be made into a function of operators by replacing r and p with their corresponding operators. Okay, so if the observable is f of r and p, then the operator will also be some function of r and p. Okay, that is what it means. So here, if this is your function, right? If this is the function 1 by 2m p square plus v. So this is kinetic energy plus potential energy. This is a function called the Hamiltonian function. Then the corresponding operator is basically this operator, which is minus h cross square by 2m del square plus v of r comma t. So here del square, this is the p square operator, and r and v of r comma t, this is from the position operator. Okay, so all of it can be written in terms of operators. And what is del square? Del square is nothing but dou square by dou x square plus dou square by dou y square plus dou square by dou z square. Of course, if it is only in one dimension, then this del square reduces to dou square by dou x square, and v of r comma t reduces to v of x comma t. Okay, if it is in one dimension, but in three dimension, this is the general formalism. So this we have seen yesterday. So if you have an observable, there will be a corresponding operator. For position, there is the position operator. For momentum, there is the momentum operator. For the kinetic energy, there is the kinetic energy operator. For the total energy, there is the Hamiltonian operator, right? And for the angular momentum, there is the angular momentum operator. Okay. All right. So if you apply, okay, now if you apply this operator onto a wave function, it should give you the observable, right, which is the eigenvalue. So if you apply the momentum operator, right, if you apply this momentum operator, p hat, onto a wave function psi, it will give you the momentum of the wave function, right? So it will give you momentum into psi. And this represents what? This represents an eigenvalue eigenfunction equation, right? So this part is the operator. This is your eigenfunction. Psi of r is your eigenfunction, and p that you get, this is the observable, which is the eigenvalue. Okay. So this represents your. So for any other operator also you can write such an equation. So the observable will be one of these, and the operator will be one of these. Okay. So that is how it will go. So now the question is, what are the components of the orbital angular momentum? Okay. So if you apply an operator, the orbital angular momentum operator, okay, which is given by minus IH cross R hat cross del. Okay, so R cross del, this is a cross product. We know how to take cross product from last semester's course. So R cross del is nothing but this matrix. So if you get the determinant of this matrix, you will get R cross del. So this is IJK. R is basically your components X, Y, Z, and del has components dou by dou X, dou by dou Y, and dou by dou Z. So if you now take the determinant of this matrix, what are you going to get? The determinant turns out to be I into Y dou by dou Z minus Z dou by dou Y minus J into X dou by dou Z minus Z dou by dou X plus K into X dou by dou Y minus Y dou by dou X. So this becomes your R cross del. So essentially your Lx operator becomes just this component, right? So it is minus IH cross Y dou by dou Z minus Z dou by dou Y. Ly becomes minus IH cross, so I have taken the minus inside basically. So you have minus X dou by dou Z plus Z dou by dou X. And Lz operator becomes minus IH cross X dou by dou Y minus Y dou by dou Z, dou X. Okay, so these are your angular momentum or orbital angular momentum operators in for all the three components in the three directions. So we have also learned about the commutator relation. So if you look at the commutator relations between any two of these, okay, Lx Ly or Lx Lz or Ly Lz, they do not commute actually. Okay, and if you look at the commutator relation of Lx Ly, it is equal to IH cross Lz. So this is something that we will derive later in the following chapters. But because you already know the commutator relation, just know for now that Lx Ly or any of these three operators do not commute with each other, and the commutator relation actually looks like this, that Lx Ly commutator is actually IH cross Lz operator. Okay, all right. Any questions up to this point? Okay. So now we come to measurement in quantum mechanics. Okay. So I'm just in this chapter we will do some problems, but we are also mostly focusing on what physically it means to do these things. Okay. So what do we mean by measurement in quantum mechanics? Now in quantum mechanics, all the theory, everything, right? All the theory is based on what is the measurement. Okay. In the sense, what is the experimental result, and the theory is trying to explain that experimental result. Okay. So the measurements in quantum mechanics are very important. But in quantum mechanics, like in the first chapter when we studied about double slit experiment, you remember that we saw that whenever we watch an electron, we are disturbing it enough that we are changing the position, the nature of the electron itself, right? So it means that when you carry out a measurement, you are changing, you are disturbing the system completely. Okay. So how is this possible? Okay. Or basically we need to know how measurements disturb a system. So in classical mechanics, it is possible to perform a measurement on a system without disturbing the system, right? You can, if you see a car moving, you can just observe it from a distance and you know what is the speed of the car, you know from which position to which position it went in and how much time. So all these measurements you can make without disturbing the car itself, right? You can look at it from a distance. But in quantum mechanics, what happens? The particles, the systems, right? Electrons, protons, and all, these are such small systems that if you try to measure anything related to this system, you are disturbing it. Okay, so how does this happen? So let's consider an example. So consider an experiment that measures the position of the electron of a hydrogen atom. Okay, so we want to measure the position of the electron of hydrogen atom. Okay, so electron is obviously moving in an orbital inside the in the hydrogen atom. Okay, and we want to find what is the position of the electron. So if we want to find the position of the electron, we have to see this electron. And in order to see this electron, we need to bombard the electron with electromagnetic radiation, which is basically photons. Okay, so if we need to bombard it with some electromagnetic radiation, first thing is, okay, what should be the wavelength of this radiation? Now, right? So the electron is moving in the orbital, okay, and the radius of the orbital is about 1 angstrom. Okay, so if you want to look at the position of the electron, the resolution of the position should be of the order of 1 angstrom, right? So it should be of the order of 10 power minus 10 meters. So for this, we need to provide a electromagnetic radiation which has wavelength that is less than 10 power minus 10 meters. Okay. So if you want to determine the position accurately, the wavelength of the radiation must be sufficiently short. Okay, it should be shorter than the electronic orbit. So the electronic orbit is of the order of 10 power minus 10 meters. So we must use a radiation whose wavelength is smaller than 10 power minus 10 meters. Okay, and this theory that the wavelength should be smaller, this comes from optics. There is some formula which tells you what is, if you need to find something with a certain resolution, what should be the wavelength for that resolution. Okay, so that is where the formula comes from. Anyway, so our wavelength should be less than 10 power minus 10 meters. Okay, so if you just calculate what is the energy, right? So energy you can always calculate. So if the wavelength is, let's say, 10 power minus 10 meter, then what will be the energy? Energy is given by the formula hc by lambda. So h into 3 into 10 power 8 meter per second by 10 power minus 10 meter. This turns out to be, and if you put the value for h, which is the Planck's constant, this turns out to be around 10 power 4 electron volt. Okay, so 10 power 4 electron volt is very high energy actually. Okay, so if you just look at the ionization of energy of the hydrogen atom, it is only 13.5 electron volt. And that is enough to remove an electron, right? Which means if we provide 10 power 4 electron volt, it completely knocks the electron from the orbit. So just by act of measurement, just by trying to see the electron, you have completely disturbed the system. In fact, you have knocked off the electron from its orbit itself completely. Okay, so a measurement, carrying out a measurement in quantum mechanics completely changes the uh, system a lot. Okay, it means that you are basically going to one of the states or one of the eigenstates essentially. Okay, so in quantum mechanical theory, the measurement device corresponds. So, okay, so this is about experimental measurement. Okay, but in theory, if you want to write down equations, our measurement device is basically the operator. So, if you want to write down the experiment in terms of equations, you have to consider that the experimental device is actually your operator. So, the operator, when it acts on the way on the state vector psi, it pushes it to one of the eigenstates psi. Okay, this we have already seen in one of the postulates. But this is the background for it. Like when you actually do the experiment, you see that just the act of performing the experiment completely changes the state of the system. And so that is why we have the postulate, and then the theory builds up on the postulate. And the theory is that if you act an operator onto a state vector psi, then it pushes it to one of the eigenstates psi m. So before the measurement, psi is a linear superposition of all of its eigenstates. But after the measurement, what happens? It becomes into one of the eigenstates. So psi can be written as I into psi, and I is your identity operator. So you can use the completeness property of the eigenstates and write down as sigma n ket psi n multiplied with bra psi n, right? So this is your identity operator. And this psi n, scalar product of psi n with psi, it will give you some scalar number, which is a n. So you're getting a n psi n. So you can see that psi is a superposition of all the eigenstates. Okay. So if psi is a superposition of all the eigenstates, when you perform a measurement on psi, which is basically saying that if you act an operator A onto the state vector psi, you will get some observable into psi n. So the observable corresponds to an and the state corresponds to the eigenstate psi n. Okay, so this is what it means. So the probability of finding the system in one particular eigenstate is given by this formula. So this we have already seen, right? We already did a problem as well. So the formula is that it will be the square of the norm of scalar product for psi n with psi divided by scalar product of psi with psi. Okay, psi with itself. So this is your probability of finding the system in one particular eigenstate. Okay. So this is a very important concept. You should always remember this, that the act of measurement changes the system. And how does it change the system? It basically pushes the system into one of the eigenstates, and the observable that you're getting, the measurement that you are getting, is going to be the eigenvalue of corresponding to that eigenstate. Okay, so this is something that you should remember. So if the system is already in the eigenstate, then you are anyway going to get back the eigenstate. Then there is no change. Okay, so this is if the system is already in eigenstate psi n, then with probability equal to 1, that is with certainty, you will get the eigenvalue corresponding to this eigenstate, which will be a n. Okay. Any question up to this point? Okay, so these are all based on experimental results. Okay, all of these statements that I'm making, they are based on experimental results and what people have observed. All right, and that is how the theory has been built on top of this. Okay, any question up to this point? All right, so now we can move on to expectation value. All right. So what do you mean by expectation value? Okay, expectation value means if you perform some measurement, what is your expected result? Okay, what is your average result? Okay, so obviously if you perform a measurement, you will get one of the eigenvalues as your result, right? But if you perform the measurement 1,000 times, okay, on an unperturbed system, if you perform the measurement 1,000 times, then if you average up all the results that you get, then what is the average number that you're going to get? That is what we mean by expectation value. So expectation value refers to, in terms of experiment, it refers to if you perform the measurement several hundred times, thousand times, then and then if you take an average of all the results that you get, what is the number that you're going to get? That is what we mean by expectation value. So the formula for that is basically you sandwich the operator A in between the bra psi and the ket psi divided by the scalar product of psi with itself. Okay, so this is the formula for expectation value of the operator A. Okay, so for example, if you want to calculate the energy of a system, okay, so what you have to do is you have to carry out the measurement several hundred times, and then you have to average out all the results that you get. Okay, so the expectation value of the energy will be, it will be the expectation value of the Hamiltonian operator. So this is going to be Hamiltonian operator sandwiched between bra psi and ket psi divided by the scalar product of the psi of the wave function with itself. Okay, so this so the angular bracket, and within the angular brackets we are writing the operator. Okay, so this is called the expectation value. This represents the average result of measuring A on the state psi. Okay, which I've already told you. Okay, so we can also we can also write this in an equivalent fashion. So instead of operator A, we can write I into A into I, and instead of operator I, right? So this is the identity operator or the unit operator. So instead of this, we can write the operator in terms of psi m and psi n, which are the eigenstates of the operator, right? Of the wave function with respect to the operator. So if we write this, then here I becomes this operator psi m psi n, and here this I becomes this operator psi m psi n, and we sum over n and m. Okay, so if we do this, and then we also have that A operating on psi n. Okay, it will give you some some eigenvalue into the psi n eigenvector. So it will give you A and psi n, right? And then all you are left with is psi m into A n into psi n. A n is just a scalar number, so it comes outside, and you have psi m into psi n. And since the eigenvectors are in general, they are supposed to be orthonormal, so you are going to get A n into delta nm. Okay, so this is your answer here. So now let's plug this inside this part here. Okay, so let's plug A n delta nm over here, and let's see what we get. So we are going to plug A n delta nm, and then we are left with this scalar product and this scalar product and summation over n comma n. Okay, so again, because it is delta nm, so delta nm will have the value 1 only when n is equal to m. Otherwise, it will have the value 0. So we have to consider that n is equal to m. So there is only one summation left in that case, and we have psi n, scalar product of psi n with psi, and the square of the norm for the scalar product. Okay, so ultimately we are getting the expectation value of A is nothing but A n into this term. And this term we have already seen that this term is nothing but your probability. Okay, this is your probability Pn. So the probability of finding the system in the state psi n. Okay, this is what this term means. So this is nothing but expectation value of A is nothing but sigma n, summation over n, A n into Pn. So this just means that expectation value of A is nothing but A1 P1 plus A2 P2 plus A3 P3 and so on. Okay, and here what are the ANs? AN is the eigenvalue of the operator acting on psi n, right? And Pn is the probability of finding the system in the state psi n. Okay, so this is your expectation value in the discrete regime. If you have like operator which is in terms of matrices, and if you have state vectors which is in terms of column vector and row vector, then this is how you will get your expectation value. But what happens in the continuous regime? So in the continuous regime, the operator will also be a continuous function, and the wave function will also be a continuous function, right? That we have already seen. Like for example, momentum operator is a continuous operator, right? It is minus IH cross dou by dou x. It is a continuous operator. Okay. So in the continuous regime, the expectation value is represented in the same manner. So here how we have an into, so summation over an into this, the scalar product of psi n with psi whole square, right? Divided by the scalar product of psi with psi. So in continuous regime, it is the similar formalism. So summation becomes integration, right? In the continuous regime, summation becomes integration. You have a into scalar product of psi of a whole square dA divided by integration of, divided by the norm of the wave function. Okay, so this is nothing but, so here we had written summation over n, a and Pn. So this summation in the continuous regime, it becomes integration, and we have a into dPa. Okay, so this is our expectation value. All right. So maybe later tomorrow we will do some more problems on this expectation value, and it will become more clear, because today I think we do not have time for it. So the way to get expectation value of a system through experiment, this I've already told you, is to first create a large number of identical systems all in the same state psi. Okay, basically you create large number, maybe several hundred or maybe thousand such identical systems where all of them are in the state psi, same state, in the same unperturbed state, and then you carry out the measurement, and then for each measurement you'll get one of the eigenvalues. Okay, but now if you take the average of all those eigenvalues, you are going to get the expectation value. Okay, so that is how you get the expectation value. So each measurement will give one of the eigenvalues. The eigenvalues will occur with certain probabilities that we now know how to calculate the probabilities. Now taking the average of all the measurements gives expectation value. Okay, all right. So today I will stop here, and if you have any questions, you can ask me. Okay, otherwise I'm going to stop here. So these concepts are very important. Okay, you should understand how expectation value is calculated, when you perform a measurement, what it is that you get. Okay, so you shouldn't be confused with expectation value and the measurement eigenvalue. Okay, those are like, when you perform a measurement, you will only get one of the eigenvalues, but the expectation value will be different from the eigenvalue, because expectation value is the average of all the eigenvalues for all the different experiments that you get, right? So that is the difference between the two. Okay, so I will stop here, and tomorrow we are going to have a class, okay, because I want to discuss the quiz solutions with all of you guys. So please be present tomorrow for the class. Okay, I'll also put it up on Classroom. All right, thank you. If there are any questions, you can ask me. Okay then, thank you so much. Yes, Gaurav. So in quantum mechanics, expectation value is basically it's the average of all the measurements, essentially. Okay, so what measurement you will get, that depends on probability. Suppose you roll a dice. Okay, best example is to think of a dice. So if you roll a dice, then you are going to get one of the 6 possibilities, right? You'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Okay, so every time you roll a dice, you are going to get 1 or 2 or 3 or something. But if you now roll a dice 1,000 times, and for every time you will get some number, and now if you take an average of all those numbers, most probably you're going to get 3. Okay, so that is what is the meaning of expectation value. So even though 3 is not, 3 is basically one of the measurements, but then it is, here you are going to get it as the expectation. It is a collection or the average of all the eigenvalues. That is what we mean by expectation value. And when you perform a measurement, you will get one of the eigenvalues. So when you roll a die, you get one of the numbers out of 1 to 6. Okay, but expectation value means if you now roll a dice 1,000 times and take an average of all the numbers that you had got in those 1,000 times when you are rolling the dice, what is the average of those? So that is your expectation. So that is the difference between these two. So that's how you should remember it. Okay, I hope it is clear. All right then. Any other question? Okay then, thank you so much.